This commenter asked for a tutorial on the ADTW because they're struggling with it and they're trying to get the Gripen. That's what we're going to do today. If you'd like me to play any other vehicles, just to review them or to show you how to play them a little better perhaps, please feel free to put it in the comments and I'll try and get around to it. The ADTW is a really interesting plane because it sucks. So at the risk of making this video a little longer than it possibly could be, I'm going to go over a couple different strategies on how you can play it, and then I'm also going to go over how I plan to grind the TIE subtree to the F-16 OCU and the Gripen myself when I get around to it, probably early next year. I'll also probably make videos on that in the future, but we'll see. The first strategy with the ATW that you can use is base bombing. Now, this is very good for RP. It's probably the most consistent as well. The F4E airframe is relatively quick, and you can usually get to the base before a lot of other stuff. The only thing that beats you out very consistently is maybe an F104S, but you can certainly keep up speed with a lot of the tornadoes, and if you get to the base, you need roughly 11 of these 750-pound bombs to take it out. You can take it out with, I think, a little less, but I just run this many, and I also run the AIM-9Ps. Now, the AIM-9Ps are a very solid missile, as you'll see in just a second here. As you can see here, I'm going in for a relatively eek base bombing, but I get them off, base is destroyed, and that's a decent amount of RP. Then I immediately turn up. The thing that most people don't talk about with the Phantoms is that they are very maneuverable. Everyone talks about the Phantom airframe like it's a brick, and it just isn't. My big advice for that, missile out here, and it's probably going to not snag a kill because you can see there's a lot of fog in the way that is fucking me up. Here I just use the radar to make sure I can get the launch and get it off on him. The thing with the Phantom airframe that isn't talked about enough is if you have low fuel, it's very maneuverable. My advice is to start with about 25 minutes of fuel. That way, it gets down to less than 20 minutes of fuel by about the time you've afterburned in to get to the base. And when you have under 20 minutes of fuel, this thing moves very nicely. Just remember to kind of feather the throttle when you're going against somebody. I absolutely whiff a gun kill here. The gun on this thing is very good. It is a Vulcan. I have a psychological problem where goddamn near every time that I go in for Vulcan shots, I just like burst fire, when in reality you should just place your gun ahead of where your target's going to be and hold down the trigger. You have whatever 650, 750 rounds in the thing. There's just no reason to be playing kind of all that cautiously with it. But that is the first big way to play this, and you can see it's relatively effective. You will usually get a base, and even if you don't get that base, you still can just dump your bombs, and you have 4 good IR missiles. With the AIM-9Ps specifically, my biggest advice is to use them correctly. Don't use them from too far away. They're very fast, and if you launch them close in on a target, then they won't have a lot of a chance to flare. The missiles go for flares, but honestly, they're not quite as bad as a lot of other IR missiles. And they can maneuver decently well. They're not crazy good at it, but they certainly can do it. You can see here I try and get a couple shots on the back of some targets that I don't think are paying attention, and nag a couple easy kills, but by this point, there's basically nobody else in the game, and I obviously survive forever, of course. The next way you can play this is as a more traditional Phantom, with 4 radar missiles and 4 IR missiles. The AIM-9Ps, as I already showed, are pretty good. The AIM-7Es aren't great, but the real problem for this thing when using it as a radar missile fighter is that the radar on it is just terrible. See, here, it's just not locking up anything. I mean, these guys are fine, but they're, I don't know, probably under 5 kilometers, and so it just doesn't want to. Typically, the radar only really likes locking stuff that are relatively high in the air and don't have a lot of other planes near them. It needs literally no clutter whatsoever, and you can see now it manages to actually lock, and I throw a missile out. Here, I really did not think it was going to hit because my teammate is right next to him, and yet it does, and snags me a nice kill. The missiles aren't truly awful. They don't have great overload, but it's definitely usable. The problem is that radar in the first place. That being said, if you want to play this thing like a radar missile fighter, and you either get down tiers or you just kind of know what to do with radar missiles that have worse radars and more trouble locking up stuff, you absolutely can. At 11.0, a lot of the stuff you'll be fighting doesn't really know how to deal with radar missiles, or if it does know how to deal with radar missiles, it's not quite experienced enough to know how to dodge them. See, right here, this guy tries and chaffs, but as long as you keep blocking, he simply gets hit by the blast of the missile. So this is a good way of playing it. You can get a good amount of RP this way. I'd say it's a little less consistent than base bombing, but A, it doesn't rely on you beating somebody else to the base, and B, in my opinion, it's more fun to fight people than it is to mindlessly bomb bases, but I'm also not shaming anyone for that because I know that, unfortunately, the way the Gaijins built this game, that's just the most efficient way to grind through trees. Now, there is another way to play this with the guns. I would not do this as a thing you should focus on, but if you've been grinding for a while and you want to do something else for fun, this is always enjoyable. Just pure volume of fire is hilarious. But those are kind of the three primary strategies with this aircraft. Now, these are how you should try and play this aircraft optimally. That doesn't mean that they're always going to work out. The truth is, the ADTW is kind of a bad aircraft. It doesn't sit at a great BR, where up tiers are incredibly punishing and down tiers are good but rare. It just isn't great overall. Its missiles are fine, the AIM-9Ps are good, but there's plenty of things at the same BR that get better missiles and more of them, and have better airframes for the kind of fighting you do at that BR. That being said, it's definitely usable. My personal advice, however, is honestly to not use it to grind the entire tree. I have not grinded out the Thai tree yet. I plan to in the very, very, very near future, and I'll probably make videos on that and give some advice out for it. Personally, I would say that the way you should go is use the ADTW on that tree specifically, if you're talking about that one line. I would grind up through either the Alpha Jet or the Alpha Jet TH, depending on what kind of gameplay you're looking for and how good you are. The earlier Alpha Jet has a solid airframe with decent maneuverability. It's a little slow for that BR of about 8.7, but its gun is very, very good. The later Alpha Jet at 10.3 or 10.7 now has fantastic missiles. It has a good gun. Just use that. Both the F5s should be very usable. And then the F16 OCU, I've heard, isn't great, but if you know how to play top tier, it's not that bad. And then there's the Gripen. If all you care about is getting a Gripen, though, I personally would not recommend trying to go for it in the Japanese tree, because I think that there are other trees where it's slightly better. That being said, if you're doing this with the ground pounding capabilities of the Gripen and the F16 or whatever, this is the best way to do it. Again, I would recommend going through it with the tech tree vehicles, but you can certainly do it with the ATTW. I hope this guide has been helpful. If you want me to play any other vehicles, anyone here, please feel free to let me know. One last housekeeping thing, I will be out of town for the next roughly week and a half in Hawaii visiting some family. However, I'm going to queue up a couple videos that I'm going to release while I'm over there, and I think that they are really interesting, so keep your eyes peeled for those later on. With that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and take care.